Okay, so I realized that of these videos that I've done so far, they have exclusively dealt with tournament play. So I thought let's pull up some. Well, let's talk through some cash hands. So these are all hands that I played at 1-2 Zoom on PokerStars, and I'll just say before I get into these hands, I'll just say a couple of things about when I'm playing 1-2 and kind of how I'm playing it. So the games. Well, first off, I will say this looks like relatively small stakes, and it is. But these games are actually reasonably tough. I think I've gone. The only times that I play online anymore are like once or twice a year when I go to Canada, like during the World Championship of Online Poker and the Spring Championship of Online Poker, and that's something that I've been doing since 2012, doing the just like traveling once or twice a year to play those. So I just get to kind of check in on the Zoom games every now and again, and I've gone from in 2012, feeling like I was a pretty big winner in the 1-2 game, to the most recent time that I played in 2015, feeling like I was winning, but just on a par with the other good players in that player pool. So I definitely feel like it's gotten a good deal more difficult. It's possible that I've been a little out of practice as well. And when I'm playing it, I'm often I use it to fill screen space while I'm playing tournaments. Like the reason that I'm traveling to Canada is to play those tournaments, and so the Zoom is just kind of a way of filling screen space. If, for instance, I've decided that I want to have 8 tables running, then as I start to get eliminated from tournaments, if I don't have new ones that I'm going to start, then I'll open up a table or two of Zoom to occupy that screen space at the same time. So it's possible that I might be a little bit more. I might feel more competitive if I were giving it 110% of my attention. I also like to be a little bit experimental with it, and because kind of during the year I spend more time studying poker or playing live poker, and so this is an opportunity for me to put in a lot of hands and test out some things that I've been thinking about or experiment with building ranges. And this video in particular is going to deal with big bluffs, which I think will be both entertaining and also more in keeping with some of the things that I'm trying to do. Like, I would say when I'm playing this game, making money, I guess, is still my number one consideration, but trying to play in a sort of creative way that pushes the boundaries of what I'm capable of, and just kind of trying to find some new spots is a very close second, and every once in a while accidentally trumps playing well and making money as my number one concern while I'm playing these games. So this is you'll see some creative stuff here. I've tried to pick out hands I think that are actually played well. I've definitely done some kind of suicidally stupid bluffs in these games as well, but I think that these ones are pretty good. I have, because it'll be more fun for me, filtered. These are just ones that work. So we are getting a slightly skewed perspective here. Obviously, there are plenty of instances where I've attempted things like this and it didn't work out. So I don't want people to come away from this video thinking to themselves, oh, I should just be doing all this bluffing because look, Andrew's just running these guys over. We're looking at some of the bigger successful bluffs that I've undertaken recently. And I'll just start talking through the hands. I think that's enough introductory information, and we'll see what happens. So opening ace queen offsuit under the gun, and this weird amount you'll see in some of the hands is just what I had my what's that thing called, table ninja set to open this kind of weird amount that's a little bit more than 2.5 times the big blind. It's fine. I don't think it's a very interesting subject to talk about, and I don't think it matters terribly much your preflop raise sizing, within reason. So Jack 7-5 flop called by both of these players. This is a pretty borderline spot to continuation bet into two people. It's a board. Well, there's a couple things. I mean, it's not very likely that anyone is nutted here. I mean, even 7-5 is not a combination. Like 7-5 suited is not really a hand that either of these players is that likely to be playing. So there's not a lot of, I mean, even if they were, there still wouldn't be that many two-pair combinations. Like 7s and 5s are in their range. Jacks could be, but I think Umberto in particular is probably 3-betting jacks. So people aren't super likely to be nutted here. There's, ace-queen is certainly behind their ranges. There's a lot of pairs in their ranges, a lot of draws in their ranges. I don't think I'm real likely to get a fold when I bet the flop, and I don't think I'm going to be ahead of when people call me when I bet the flop either. However, I do think ace queen is going to have pretty decent equity to the point where check folding doesn't feel great to me either, because I will often be folding the best hand, and even when I'm not folding the best hand, I'll often be folding a lot of equity, particularly given that I have some backdoor draws as well. This is not a fantastic hand for barreling. I mean, I would definitely be betting here if I had 8-9 or 2 diamonds or 2 clubs, but it does have some barreling potential. I think kings are pretty good cards for me. 10s are okay. Diamonds are okay. It does have some barreling potential as well. And you can see that I did opt for a bet on the flop. I get 1 call and 1 fold. So I think I don't know if we can narrow Umberto's range down too much aside from the things that I already mentioned. If he did have a set, I wouldn't be shocked if he chose to slow play it here. Some people won't because it feels like a very drawly board. Maybe he has a raising range that includes sets in some of his bigger draws. Maybe he doesn't. I'm certainly not going to take them out of his range entirely as a result of the flop call. The 8 on the turn is not a very good card for my hand, and I think it's quite a good card for his range. He's got 8-7 in there, he's got 10-9, and then he's got other hands maybe like 9-8 and even 9-7 suited is a possibility, or 7-6 suited, where he's picked up some additional equity. So I think there's a very bad card for me to barrel with the hand that I have. I might show up with hands. I could actually see myself barreling a hand like 7-6 suited here. Or I guess if I had ace-6 suited, certainly 2 diamonds would be good barreling hands. So it's not that I would never barrel here. I don't like to think about bluffing in those kind of binary terms, like this is a good spot for bluffing, or this is a spot where I will bluff and this is a spot where I won't bluff. I think more in terms of ranges, and this is, I think, is the hand that is not very good for bluffing in this spot, and so I'm checking with the intention of folding to a bet. Umberto checks behind, and this, I think, tells me a lot of information about his range. I think he's extremely unlikely to check behind very strong hands here, meaning 2 pair or better, and even his better 1 pairs, I think there's a good chance he's going to want to bet them. There's a lot of reasons why he should want to bet if he has an extremely strong hand. For one thing, I'm not always check folding. I mean, I'm always check folding ace queen, but I could see myself playing hands like aces through queens this way for a check. So if he has a set, or he has 2 pair, or he has a straight, I mean, there definitely are hands in my range that he can value bet against, and the board is going to get a lot scarier for those. Even if he has a straight, for instance, he doesn't particularly want to see a diamond. He doesn't, a board pair isn't fantastic for him. So there's a lot of ways that the board can get worse for him later, and I think he's quite unlikely to slow play. So when he checks behind on the turn, he's telling me that he has a pretty marginal hand, and the deuce of hearts on the river is not doing anything to improve that. So I think some of the hands that I mentioned that I didn't really think he was going to fold on the turn, hands like 8-9 or 9-7 or 7-6 or maybe even 5-6 if he was getting particularly frisky on the flop, those are the kinds of hands I could see him having here. And as I mentioned, I do have overpairs in my range. I have the aces, the kings, the queens. I think ace-jack is maybe also a hand that I would play this way. Like, I'm going to check this turn quite often. With ace-queen, I'm check folding, but there's lots of other hands that I would be checking. And with the same river action where it goes check-check on the turn, there's a lot of hands in my range that I can value bet. Like, I think I can very confidently value bet king jack plus, probably even queen jack, I would value bet. So I think that I can do quite a lot of value betting here in this river spot, actually. And the corollary to that, I mean, I think his range is pretty capped. My range is maybe capped, but it's capped out higher than his. I think that I have a lot of hands in my range that can be bet for value, and I should be doing a fair bit of bluffing here as well. I'm not going to want to bluff if I had a hand like 7-6, because then I do have a little bit of showdown value, and I also block some of the hands that I was hoping to make him fold. However, I think that ace-queen is a pretty good bluffing hand. It has little to no showdown value against his check-back range. I would expect that he would also bet a lot of his bluffs on the turn. Also, if I check the ace-queen and he has something like busted diamonds, he might bluff with it anyway, so the likelihood that I'm going to check and win at showdown with ace-queen, I think, is quite low. I'd block ace-jack and queen-jack, which is very good. If he happens to have, I mean, I don't think him having queens is that relevant, but I do block that for what it's worth. So I think this is actually a pretty straightforward spot to bet as a bluff. And you can see that I'm using rather large sizing, and that's because I think that I don't think there's a lot of reason not to. I think I can use the same sizing with hands like aces and kings and queens and jacks. And It's actually, if anything, I might want to use somewhat smaller sizing just because it's somewhat unlikely that I'm going to show up with a bluff here. I guess ace queen and ace king are both hands that I would want to play this way though, and there's a lot of combinations of those, so I might be off about that. But the point I want to make in including this hand is that this is a bluffing spot that I think a lot of people tend to miss. And if you're playing against stickier opponents who don't really have a lot of discipline or hand reading skill or whatever, that may be fine. I mean, I can imagine that there's a lot of smaller stakes players who just call way too much here on the river when they have one pair, and they can say to themselves like, well, he might have ace king, I guess I'll call. Realistically, a lot of people don't bluff here with ace king or ace queen, and many opponents aren't really going to expect you to. And I think that the optimal strategy probably does involve value betting, as I mentioned, like king jack or queen jack plus, and then also bluffing with hands like ace queen, ace king, maybe king queen. Yeah, so that's what I did, and I won the pot. Peeling jack 10 offsuit against an under the gun open when I'm in the big blind. This is actually strikes me as a little bit borderline. I think I was getting perhaps a bit friskier than I should be from the big blind. I definitely wouldn't want to do this at a 9-handed table. 6-handed, obviously Sam Solo's range can be a bit wider, but I think it helped actually that I didn't have any stats on this player. The people who are regulars in this game, I did kind of run into them reasonably often and had a fair number of hands on them. Although I'm just looking at my HUD now, this might have been early in a session in a given year, because even, like, I think I'm a Sound and Nafazori are regulars, and I only have, like, as of the time of the Sam was played, only like 81 hands on them. So it's probably not even that relevant that I don't recognize Sam Solo, come to think of it, in which case I think this is kind of a marginal pre-flop peel. Marginal in this case meaning probably bad, but okay, I did it. I saw the flop with jack 10. I do think this is a pretty good spot to make a small dunk bet. I don't really see him continuation betting hands like ace king and ace queen, which means that I have a lot of incentive to bet when I flopped a pair of some sort. I don't really want him to take a free card with those. I'm not going to get value out of checking and calling with those if he's checking behind with a lot of his overpair type hands, and the board is going to get worse for me before it gets better. So I think this is a reasonable spot to make a little bet like this with some pairs, and then I can balance that out by doing it with a variety of draws, including I think one of the better hands for this are draws that are not really good enough to check call or check raise, and I think jack 10 is a good example of that. It's a hand that has a lot of equity against like ace queen, ace king kinds of hands, but so I really don't want to have to check fold if he does continuation bet those. And I'm not in terrible shape if I bet and he calls me. You know, I'm drawing live. I think it's relevant that I have a club in my hand because I'm going to play some club draws like this as well, and so I definitely want to be able to bluff if the turn brings a club, and having a club in my hand is very valuable for that. So having the potentially two live over cards if he calls me with, say, pocket eights, or he has a hand like 9-8 himself. You know, having two overcards is potentially relevant here. This is just sort of a hand where I don't really want to get blown off of my equity by checking, and if he does make a big raise, I think I should be folding it. I think I'm going to have other draws in my range that'll be better for continuing to a big raise, and I think this kind of negates the point of, like, if I'm going to do this anyway, I should probably just check call or check raise rather than betting and calling a raise. I mean, if the whole point of using this hand for donking was that it's not good enough to continue to a bet, then I probably shouldn't be continuing to a big raise as well. So I guess I'm already undermining my original claim about not including badly played hands here. I think the actual bluffing aspect of this is not that bad, though. I mean, obviously, like, I am planning on doing some bluffing after calling. I'm not just calling hoping to hit a gut shot. You know, I am thinking I'm going to have some profitable bluffing opportunities. I still don't think it's a good call, but the bluffing component is already there when I call the flop raise. So the club is a very good card for me. I am going to play, and actually 5 of clubs in particular. I have 8-6, and clubs are both squarely within my range. And my range is actually quite strong at this point. Most of the draws I could have got there. In fact, the only reason I have a hand this week is because I made a bad call on the flop and possibly a pre-flop as well, which is all the more reason now to turn it into a bluff, because if I weren't bluffing with this hand, what would I be bluffing with? what would my bluffing range be here? Pretty much everything else has gotten there. I guess 10-8 would be the other, maybe the more obvious candidate if I had 10-8. But that's pretty small considering how strong my range is here, and I would like to be able to bet with some other hands. So I think either betting now or checking and then firing the river if he bets, or potentially even check raising the turn. I think those are all options, but I should be representing that I have a strong hand here because it's a spot where I often will have a strong hand, and this is a rare weak hand that I'm holding. 6 on the river, I don't think actually changes that much for me. I suppose there are some hands like 9-8 and 8-7 that have now gotten even stronger for me on the river. So I think all the more reason to be using this now as a bluff. I still have flushes in my range. I still have turn straights in my range, and then I have some rivered straights as well. Sam Solo, I don't think really has that many 8s. I think if he had 9-8 or 8-7, I wouldn't really expect him to make that big raise on the flop. I think he'd be more likely to call with those hands. So I'm not too worried about running into an 8 of his, and this is just another one of those spots where I think that I can bet. And as you can see, I didn't even use a particularly large size in this circumstance because I really am quite unlikely to be bluffing here. I have a very wide value range. I have very few bluffs. And I'm not even sure that I need Sam Solo, or I'm trying to make Sam Solo fold particularly strong hands. He very well may just be planning on calling if he has like queens. But sometimes when he raises that flop, he was doing it with a not very strong hand of his own, and I lose to those hands. Like, he might have been raising the flop with something like ace king, and I can't beat ace king. So I certainly want to make some sort of bet here, even if the only hand, even if he only folds like his ace king, ace queen hands, and he doesn't fold any pairs, this is still probably a profitable bluff. Three betting ace nine suited versus a cutoff open, especially from a slightly more active player, 27-24, and this actually is filtered by position. So he opens 57% from the small blind, 45% from the button, 29% from the cutoff, which I actually think 29 is a little on the high side. You can see my own number is 22% from the cutoff. So this is all the more a reason why I want to three bet him just a touch wider than usual, which I think ace nine suited probably falls in that category of not quite a standard three bet from these spots, but again, someone who I think is opening a little too wide from the cutoff, and consequently I want to widen my own three betting range a little bit. This is, I think, a great hand to toss in there. And that's because of the possibility of getting really dreamy flops like this. So some of the other bluffs we've looked at so far have been ones that I think are maybe a little hard to spot, or I had to make a lot of an argument for why I think the hand that I had was a good bluffing candidate. This is not a hard to spot situation. Like, you should be looking at a flop like this one and saying, like, when you get a spot like this, like, bluff, 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 bluff should be going off in your head. That if you're not taking spots like this, I would say that you have big leaks in your bluffing game, and that's true. Like, again, some of those earlier spots, I was saying it might be a little dependent on having opponents who are actually capable of doing a little bit of hand reading or some disciplined folds. This is a spot that I would take against basically any player, any stake, no matter how loose I thought that person was. There's just so much value in playing a hand like this aggressively. Okay, I did not mean to do that. Okay, so he checks, I'm betting the flop, and this is going to be like I'm barreling any turn card, whether or not it improves my hand, and I'm probably going to do a lot of river barreling as well. The king, I guess I shouldn't have said any turn card, because the king is a really bad one for me. That said, I actually don't know that betting here would be a disaster anyway. You know, there definitely are hands that I want to value bet. Like, I want to value bet all my full houses here. And I probably even just ace king I want to value bet. So, I mean, I do get to do some bluffing here, and I don't know that it's that trivial for him to just call down. I mean, I think he's probably going to call once and fold with a lot of hands like queen jack or 10 jack. He's certainly not folding a king. I do think I want to have some kind of bluffing range here. So maybe, I mean, on the one hand, like, it's a very bad card for my hand. Like, this is not the card I was hoping to see. I mean, a blank is not good, but if the turn were like a deuce of clubs, that's fine. The king of clubs is not a card I'm excited to see. At the same time, I don't think it's really that trivial for him to just call down three streets with one pair. So we might be slipping a little bit outside of the like slam dunk definitely bluff type of situation. I don't think betting there would be terrible, although I didn't do it. When he checks to me a third time, I do think that I want to have, again, some kind of value betting range. There are hands like, I was starting to say aces or ace queen, but I don't know that I would actually bet those on the flop. I'm trying to think about what hands are in my value range now that I checked the turn with. I suppose I might, maybe my smallest full houses I might check the turn, or like king 10 could be a good example of a turn checking hand. So I can imagine, I guess, some full houses that I check on the turn. Ace king I might check on the turn. So I could see myself here showing up with some value hands, but I actually think if I'm gonna bluff with this, I'm probably better off doing it on the turn than on the river. Looking at this now, but it worked. I think this is a better hand for calling than for three betting. Bonjour is probably including again. I think he's a little wide here from under the gun one with 26%. My own number there is 20%. But I think that I think he's going to have a lot of hands that I dominate, like King Jack and Queen Jack in his range, maybe even King 10, Queen 10 suited. And by three betting, I cause him to fold those hands. So I think this is a better one for flatting than for three betting. When both people check to me here and I have the king of diamonds, I'd say pretty trivial bet. I can cause better hands to fold, right? Ace jack plus can fold, and I can start putting pressure on pocket pairs right away. Even if pocket pairs don't fold right away, I have very good equity against them. I also block flushes. There's just every reason in the world to bet here. I chose to use small sizing because I want to bet a depolarized range in the spot. In other words, I want to be able to make bets with hands like pocket sixes without diamond, and I don't think I can profitably make large bets with those. So if you're just choosing one bet size for this situation, it's entirely possible that using different bet sizes is the best strategy of all and trying to balance all those different bet sizes. But if you're just using one, I think small size here is actually pretty good. I think that neither of these players is going to have strong hands very often. So there's always opportunity to ramp up the bet sizing later, but this is a spot where I think I can do a lot of betting with a lot of different types of hands, and that usually when you're in that sort of spot, you're going to use small sizing. I think small sizing is best. I don't think the seven of clubs changes terribly much. If anything, it's probably a better card for my range than for his. And this is one of the advantages of making that small bet on the flop, is that my range is really wide open, and I can do that with all sorts of different stuff. If I had 7-6, I think I would want to make a small bet here because I still think he might have just some bear over cards in his range that he chose to check call the small flop bet with. So I actually can make the 7-6 as a kind of value / protection type bet. And then I might have 8-6 suited in my range that got there. I still have flushes in my range and sets and lots of other stuff. I'm going to be a little less polarized, a little more polarized with my bet now, but still not terribly polarized. So only betting half the pot. He calls, river 10. Again, I'd say good card for me, better card for me. I have got all those strong hands in my range. He probably does not, at this point, after check calling twice, have a lot of nutted hands in his range. He may have hands like aces with the ace of diamonds that he's just never folding, and that's fine. He's allowed to have a check call range. Just because he sometimes calls a bluff doesn't mean we should never bluff. But I think this is a very good card to fire one more time. I do block kings with the king of diamonds, which is a pretty good hand to block. I block ace king with the king of diamonds, which is another hand I could see him playing this way that might consider calling a river bet actually. So yeah, and now is when we're most polarized. I'm no longer betting hands like 8-7. My betting range here is probably going to be 10-9 plus or maybe 5-4 plus, but it's going to be two pair or better and bluffs. And so that's why we're seeing now the larger bet sizing, because by the time we get to the river, I'm more polarized. On the flop and turn, protection was a significant part of my reason for betting with some chunks of my range, and I'm using smaller sizing because I'm less polarized. We get to the river, obviously protection no longer a concern, more polarized, larger bet. Chose to 3-bet king jack offsuit from the small blind against the cutoff open. I'm not prepared to call that standard. And this guy is actually only showing 17% open from the cutoff. His fold to 3-bet is not particularly high. I don't really think this is a good 3-bet. I do think that this is a good time to bet, though. If you think about what my 3-betting range looks like, it has a lot of ace-x in it, and it has a lot of pocket pairs in it. And so anytime that I get this far and I don't have a pair on an ace high board, I'm very often going to have a pair on an ace high board. And so anytime that I don't, I should certainly consider bluffing. And then on top of that, like bigger cards are going to be better for bluffing. So I might also have hands like 8-7 of diamonds in my range, and I think that's going to be less good for betting here because he'll call with hands like 9s and 10s that have me in really bad shape. However, King Jack has pretty reasonable equity against 9s and 10s, and I've got the backdoor straight draw where I can barrel, and unlike with a hand like 8-7, the cards that give me the gut shot are actually going to be maybe a little bit scary for him. So they're going to be overcard. Like if he calls me with something like pocket eights, then a 10 or a queen is going to be an overcard for him versus if he calls me with pocket eights and the turn is a 5, giving me an open-ended straight draw when I have 8-7, that's not really going to be that scary of a card for him. So I think there's a lot of reasons why this hand is going to be better for bluffing than 8-7, and I do have a spade in my hand as well, which is nice. So I think this is a very good hand for bluffing on the flop. And realize that none of this, like, it's entirely possible. He has plenty of ace-x in his range. So this is not a matter of me saying, oh, he can't possibly have an ace, so I can just bluff here. It's very possible that I'm bluffing into an ace. Right? When I'm only risking half the pot, this is not about like being sure that he's going to fold and then bluffing. I think that's entirely the wrong approach to thinking about bluffing, which is why I really want to highlight that. It's not a matter of saying, oh, I better not bluff, he might have an ace. Like that's not how it works. The 3 is not really a good card for barreling. I'm going to have some barreling candidates, mostly spades and 5-4. I guess if I 3-bet that 5-4 suited, then I can barrel there. But I don't think barreling King Jack is good. On the plus side, I'm going to have some value hands that I'm checking. So some of the weaker aces that I would bet on the flop, maybe like ace jack or ace queen would be one of the worst aces I would bet on the flop. I would want to check that on the turn. I think I would also check pocket aces on the turn, although I might check the flop with that. But I do have some pretty good hands that I would check on the flop, that I would check on the turn, and now would want to value bet again on the river. So when he checks back the turn, I think that he's capping himself a little bit. He can still have ace-x in his range, but I also think he has a lot of hands like 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s are probably in his range as well, and there's a good chance that those are going to fold to a river bet. I decided to go for a 3x pot shove, which this is probably an example of one of my more ambitious bluffs, and frankly not good. I think that although it is true that I'm less capped than he is because I have... Well, see, the thing is, I don't know that I can actually represent a hand like queens all that credibly. I think that was my thinking, was like, well, I can have aces or queens, and he probably doesn't. But I don't know that that's true. I think queens is actually a realistic hand for him, and I probably wouldn't bet queens on the flop. So actually I think it's a more realistic hand for him than for me. The same might actually go for aces. I don't... or at least I don't know that I'm really that much more likely to have aces than he is. I think maybe I was just reading a lot into the fact that he checked the turn, and I think this is a fine spot to bluff, but I think I should really just be looking to make a small bluff to get him off of hands like pocket 10s and not making a big bluff like this, trying to make him fold an ace, which is what I decided to go for. And also if he has an ace, he has a pretty significant blocker to my actually having a set of aces. The one thing that this does have going for it is that a lot of people, like for exploitive reasons, many people just only overbet with really nutted hands and don't ever overbet bluff. So it's entirely possible that he's going to overfold to this just because he's not used to ever seeing people do it as a bluff. That's really just sort of a weak defense for a bad shove. But that's the kind of thing that I had in mind when I said I like to get experimental in these games. All right, nothing too experimental about opening queen 9 suited from the cutoff. Choosing to bet here is it's a little ambitious, but I think it's not as crazy as it seems, or I don't know if it seems crazy to you, but I don't. So I know some people have a rule of like I don't bluff into 2 people or something like that. This player here, which I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, is pretty much a non-factor in the hand. I mean, yeah, every once in a while he'll wake up with a 10 or a 3, but his range for seeing the flop is very, very wide, right? He was getting good odds, and he was closing the action pre-flop, so he has a very, very wide range for seeing the flop. It's also a very capped range for seeing the flop. Like, I would assume that he's squeezing probably even 10s, but certainly his bigger pairs he's going to squeeze. Gilles also probably 3-betting his biggest pairs. So this is actually a flop that favors me pretty well. You know, I've got the jacks plus in my range, and these players do not, and this player in particular is going to have nothing extremely often. I do think that Gilles has a fair number of pocket pairs in his range, and he has some other floats as well. The 10 coordinates reasonably well with a lot of his suited connector type hands, so sometimes we'll pair the 10, sometimes we'll have like backdoor draws that he decides to float me with. That's all fine. The 9 in my hand is a little bit of a blocker. Having an overcard to the 10 is nice for that reason. The 9 is also going to be an overcard to some pocket pairs that he peels me with. I can barrel if the turn is a jack. I don't think this bet is a disaster. It's one of the worst hands that I could see betting here, and I don't think checking would be terrible either. But it's another one of those like equity preservation things where I know that I have some equity in the pot, and if I check, I'm going to end up and Gilles bets, I'm going to end up folding a lot of equity very often, and that gives me some extra incentive to want to make a bet myself. 7 on the turn does not improve my hand. It does improve a few hands in their range, so if like 8-9 or 7-8 chose to float me, it helps them. Pocket 7s certainly quite a bit improved. And given this was already a pretty marginal flop bet, I think it certainly belongs in my give up range after when the flop bet gets called in 2 spots. I need to have a healthy give up range, and one of the worst hands in the flop betting range that also did not improve on the turn, that's a very easy just give up candidate. Now we come around with nobody betting on the turn. I think that it's easier for me to represent a strong hand than it is for them. Again, this might be a little bit on the exploitive side, but I think that they're just basically telling me they don't have very good hands after they don't bet the turn. So I put out I'm going on the large side. I think I would bet, I'd rather bet bigger than this than smaller than this. I mean, I do think it's a spot where I could more easily be bluffing than value betting. Like if I'm betting Queen 9 on the flop, I have a tremendous number of no pair hands that see the river, and there's not that much that I'm going to be value betting on the river, but I think like over pairs, it's plausible I can play them this way sometimes. But the point is, it's not hard for me to find hands to bluff with here, and that should make me want to use the larger sizing. So I definitely wouldn't want to go smaller than this. If anything, I could go bigger, but the suited aces from under the gun, especially if they are wheel aces, are hands that I'm trying to. They're just some of my lighter under the gun opens, but I think it's fine. And the reason why I'm playing them is that they can bluff well on boards like this, so they give me some reasonably strong hands on boards like this, which ordinarily my under the gun range would not have. So if you're only opening ace jack plus and pocket pairs, you'll have some sets on this board, and you'll have pocket 9s, but even your overpairs are not that strong. Like, this is not a great flop for pocket queens. So you really end up being very vulnerable on these boards if you don't have, and the nut flush draw is, I mean, on the one hand, it's not a strong hand, but I would way rather have ace deuce suited here than pocket queens. And it's so if he decides like this is a good board for him to play back at me, well, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm probably going to 3-bet the flop and pretend that I have a set. So that's gonna that helps to counteract a play that pocket queens hates. If I bet here with queens and get raised, that sucks. And so having a hand that is happy enough to get raised by air, where the queens, if I do end up folding them, which I might, to a raise here on the flop, if he was raising air, that works out really well for him. So I want to make sure I have a hand where that punishes him for raising air, so that I'm protected against that strategy, or I'm in a position to profit from that strategy is maybe a better way of saying it. So I come right out betting. He calls. Barreling the turn is an option. This particular turn I don't think is very good for check raising. So I think I can either check fold. I don't think check calling is an option here. There's just that's not a good way to play draws. You really don't want to be in a position where you're just playing a draw calling and hoping to catch with no backup plan. That's go play slot machines if that's what you want to do. I think you generally want to be able to, if you can't play your draw aggressively, it's usually not worth playing at all. So I'm going to either check and give up or barrel again here. I have some 9s in my range, but not very many. And some of them I might check the flop with, like 10-9 or 8-9. So I don't think barreling here is a real good idea. I think I should check and give up. And I think checking and giving up is probably the right play here. I did go for another bet. It can't be too bad, but I think that Queen Jack would actually be a better betting hand here. And lower spades would be a better betting hand here than ace deuce of spades. I really don't think this is a good 3-barreling hand. I've often asked the question, if I didn't bluff with this, what would I bluff with? But you can flip that question around as well, and you can say, if I didn't give up with this, what would my give up range be? And I think this hand just squarely belongs in the give up range. Among other things, I mentioned like Queen Jack as an example of a hand that I would also barrel on the turn. I think that Queen Jack is a better 3-barreling hand because, especially if I don't have spades, he might have a hand like ace x of spades in that he's holding. And so that's part of the value in betting Queen Jack is that I can make him fold a hand like ace x of spades. When I have ace x of spades, he can't have it, which reduces the number of combinations of hands he has that are going to fold the river. So he did end up folding there, but I think that the turn barrel is defensible. The river bet, I think, should probably just be a give up unless you have good reason to think your opponent is going to fold too often. Jack 10 suited, hand I'm pretty excited to have. Not thrilled facing a 3-bet, but this is blind versus blind. His 3-betting range can be pretty wide. Jack 10 suited has very good flop ability, and it's good for attacking attacking his post-flop bluffs, basically. I imagine I'm going to check raise the flop. There's a lot of good reasons to do this with Jack 10 suited. I'm not going to do this with all my flush draws, so if I had like ace 10 of spades, I think I would just call a flop bet. But the ace 10 of spades has showdown value. The Jack 10 of spades does not, and that's one of the best reasons to check raise it. The Jack 10 also has a backdoor straight draw, which helps a lot. And the fact that I can potentially check raise him off of a hand like ace queen is really nice for me when I have Jack 10. You might say the same thing about ace 10, like, well, if you have ace 10, don't you want him to fold ace queen? But ace 10 blocks ace queen, and you don't want to block your opponent's folding range when you're bluffing. I do think check calling is defensible as well. There probably aren't that many hands I would check raise for value here, but I think check raising Jack 10 is a little bit better, and check calling if I had either fewer backdoor draws, like I didn't have the backdoor straight draw, and or more showdown value. I definitely think I should check raise the turn if I don't check raise the flop. I can represent a slow played set. I can potentially represent 5-4. I think check raising the turn would be the way to go had he bet the turn. When he doesn't bet the turn, I think he's capping himself. He probably even has some hand that he thought he was bluffing with, like the ace queen, where now that we've gotten this far, there's still even if he doesn't fold a pair to my river bet, there's still a lot of value in just getting him to fold those unpaired hands. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Like when you get to the river with a hand that has so little showdown value, like not only do you not have a pair, but you even lose to a lot of unpaired hands, and those unpaired hands are still in your opponent's range, you usually have a good bluffing candidate. It doesn't have to be a large bluff. That's another thing a lot of people get wrong, is they tend to think, well, I want my opponent to fold, so I better bet big. You want your opponent to fold, and it's true that most people will fold more often to big bets. On the other hand, when they don't fold, you would like to lose as little money as possible. So it is a balancing game, just like with value betting. Like, you don't just say, oh, I want my opponent to call, so I'll bet the minimum. I mean, some people do actually do that, but that's not good poker. You want to maximize the amount of money that goes in the pot when you have a value bet. So you want to kind of strike a balance between getting called and getting a lot of money in the pot. Well, bluffing, it's kind of the flip of that. You want to strike a balance between getting folds, but also not losing too much when you run into a hand that just isn't going to fold. And I think that hands like this that have such poor showdown value that they can't even beat hands that your opponent is probably looking at as busts, those are good candidates for making a small bluff. So I think potentially you could go even smaller than this. Overcalling with 8-6 suited. There are certainly some people I'd want to squeeze against. I don't really have any information on Katsi in terms of whether he's opening too many hands or whatever. The fact that he's not a regular, and in this case, you can see I do have a couple hundred hands now on this player, Pepialis, a couple hundred hands on SGK. So the fact that I don't have any hands on Katsi suggests to me that he's probably a somewhat weaker player, and that makes me inclined to call maybe just a touch wider than I otherwise would out of the small blind, and I think that's what's motivating this. I think it's a borderline call pre-flop, not really something I'd want to do against better players. I might consider squeezing it against some people, but I think if I'm assuming the Katsi is a somewhat weaker player, and that's a weak read, but that's my guess, then I think this is okay. Flop a gut shot, probably not enough to continue with, to be honest. I see that I did peel here, but I don't think that's that good. The problem, you can't float that wide on ace-high boards because it's very hard to get somebody off of an ace. If this same board were 10-7-4, there are going to be some runouts where if he has a pair of tens, right, the turn or the river can be ace, king, queen, jack, and the board is going to end up getting scary for him. The board never gets scary for an ace. Also, on a board like 10-7-4, I can, a float with a hand like queen jack, I've got two overcards to the 10 if he does have the 10. There's no way to have overcards to an ace. So I'm just so far behind the big chunk of his range that is ace-x. Like all that ace-x stuff in his range, I'm just worlds behind a hand like that. I'm drawing to four outs. And so that's a very difficult equity disadvantage to overcome, even if you allow that, when I do catch him in a bluff, or like sometimes he doesn't have an ace and I end up with a profitable bluffing spot later, you really have to get a lot of those spots to make up for the fact that I'm just lacking so much raw equity when I'm calling a bet, and I need 27% equity, and against a significant chunk of his range, I have like 16% equity. That's a hard thing to overcome. So that should be a fold, is what I'm saying. However, the turn gives me some hope because it completes an open-ended straight draw, which would be a more defensible call here. And I do have a blocker to 5-6. Not that that's really that relevant. Once he checks the turn, I don't think he really is going to have 5-6 in his range. But this is one of those examples of ignore for a second the fact that the river's an 8. This is one of those examples of spots where you get to the river with 8 high, you just have to bluff with it. I mean, he can have hands like king queen or queen jack or something that are just going to be a trivial fold to any kind of bet. The one other thing I can say in defense of floating with this is that there's no flush draw on the board, so it's a little harder for him to put me on some sort of busted draw as a result of my checking and calling, especially with 7-4 getting there. So the fact that I can bluff when the turn, when like a 3 comes out is nice, but this hand is going to prove an exception. But in general, I'm not going to do a lot of bluffing when I pair the 8 because now I do beat those hands like king, queen, and I have some showdown value. So there's less incentive for me to bluff. And that's actually another reason to not really float with 6-8 because it's not a hand I'm going to want to bluff with when the turn is an 8, and an 8 in general is a card that's pretty good for my range. And so if I'm thinking about what's my bluffing range going to be when the turn is an 8, well, 8-6 for the most part is not going to fall into that category. So initially I check here thinking, well, sometimes I'm just going to go to showdown and win against king queen, so no sense in turning this into a bluff now. And then he bets. I don't think my hand is strong enough to call a bet. He might occasionally bluff here with king queen, but I think he plays a lot of ace-x this way, like too much for me to think I can profitably call here. But then again, every once in a while he will be bluffing. And even though I can beat those bluffs, and a lot of times you don't want to bluff when you have showdown value. In this case, I don't have showdown value that I can realize. In other words, I don't think I can profitably call this bet. So he could be bluffing here with a hand like king queen. He's certainly going to fold that to a check raise. And I think it's actually pretty hard for him to call a check raise even if he has an ace, because I can play hands like 5-6, I can play hands like sets this way. And you might say to yourself, would you really check the river with a set? Yeah, I absolutely would, because I think a lot of people will value bet their ace if they have one. Like I think any hand that's going to be willing to call a river bet will value bet anyway. So I don't think that you really miss a bet by check raising the river, and maybe he calls the check raise and then you win money with your set. And you might be thinking, well, if maybe he calls the check raise, why are you bluffing? And again, bluffing is not about being sure that your opponent is going to fold. I don't know what he's going to do with an ace, and so I want to check raise hands that are better than an ace and check raise hands that are worse than an ace. And that way I win no matter what he does. The objective is really to put him in tough spots, to give him tough decisions. That's what poker comes down to. When you're playing maybe against really weak players, you can get away with saying poker is about figuring out exactly what my opponent has and exactly what he's going to do and playing circles around him. But that's not usually possible. I mean, even when you're playing against weak players, like I play against a lot of weak players when I play live poker, and I don't always know exactly what they have or exactly what they're going to do. So mostly I like to try to put them into tough spots. And I think that a big check raise on the river puts them into a tough spot. River check raise bluffs, your river check raise bluffing range is generally going to come from hands like these, where if I got to the river with no showdown value whatsoever, let's say that somehow I had floated the flop with like 10 jack of diamonds, I'm not going to check the river with that hand because I don't want to give him a chance to just check behind and beat me when he has king queen. So I'm gonna bet myself if I have 10 jack. So my river checking range consists really exclusively of hands that have showdown value. Some of them are good enough to call a river bet, some of them aren't. This is an example of one that isn't. So even though initially I check it on the river thinking I have a chance of winning at showdown, I end up turning it into a bluff after he bets. So I'm getting new information now. When I check the river, I'm thinking an 8 might be good here. And then he bets the river, I'm thinking to myself, well, even if an 8 is good, I'm not going to realize that showdown value. And because I am going to have a range of a value betting range or a value check raising range, I want to have a check raise bluffing range as well. So now I have to think about, of the hands that I checked on the river, I've got to build a range out of those, a bluffing range. And this, I think, is a very good candidate for it. The fact that I paired specifically the 8 on the river is a little bit relevant as well, because I could see him playing a hand like pocket 8s this way, where he bets the flop, and then he checks the turn, and then he rivers a set, and he bets it. And when I have an 8, the chance of him having a set of 8s goes way down, and that's like the number one hand. If you tried to make this play without an 8 in your hand, or I guess you could still have the case 8, if that's like the number one hand I could see it. Like if this bluff doesn't work and he calls, 8s is like the number one hand I would expect him to have. And so blocking that is actually quite valuable, I would say. It's a little bit relevant that I blocked 5-6, but again, not really that relevant, I don't think. Flatting with king 10 offsuit. We talked about king queen before and why I chose to flat with that. Cutoff versus button. King 10 offsuit is just not a good hand, and I don't have a lot of hands on Alinghi, but he doesn't really seem that aggressive. On the other hand, he is not a player I recognize. I don't have very many hands on him, so that might have incentivized me to get involved in a few more pots with him. But and he's playing a sub 200 or sub 100 big blind stack, sub $200 stack, which that's a pretty big red flag on him not being one of the stronger players. So I think that this is not something I'd recommend doing in general. I think this should be a fold to a cutoff open, or maybe a 3-bet, but I can't see flatting it too much. I think it's somewhat more defensible if you have reason to believe your opponent isn't going to play that well, but still not really that great. All right, I flop a gut shot, and this is like part of the reason why it's not that great, because even here I get an above average flop. Right? I've got a gut shot, a potentially live king, and my equity against that big ace-x chunk of his range, like we talked about in the previous hand, just not that good. So I do end up peeling here. One of the reasons I'm peeling here, and again, this would be better if I had a heart in my hand, but one of the reasons I'm peeling here is that I am going to peel here with a lot of heart draws. So if the only hands that I call with on the flop are flush draws or pairs, then it's hard for me to bluff when the turn is a heart. And it's very easy for my opponent to just correctly check fold when the turn is a heart, and many people will do that because they say to themselves, well, he must have either a pair or a flush, and he probably wouldn't turn his pairs into bluff, so that he doesn't have a lot of incentive to do that. So if he's betting, he must just have a flush. That's how I read hands, and I think it's pretty effective. So I want to have some hands that I can bluff with when the turn is a heart. And part of the value in calling with king 10 is that I'm anticipating profitable bluffing opportunities when the turn is a heart. If I had a heart in my hand, those opportunities would be even more profitable. If this flop were ace queen 9, where I could have 10 jack in my floating range, then king 10 would be a less good float here. However, the fact that there are no open-ended straight draws means that my hands that bluff when the next card is a heart, that bluffing range has to come from gut shots. So that's why we're seeing a float here with king 10. But again, I think in general, it's even as early as pre-flop, it's just a fold. So he bets now just $10. I think this was just a sizing thing that I picked up on that just seemed pretty weak, and so I chose to peel one more time, and I mean, the thing is, I really have to believe that it's going to be profitable for me to bluff hearts or just bluff in general if you check to the river to me. But I think if hearts miss, I don't think bluffing the river is that profitable because a lot of people will overcall in that situation just thinking that, well, hearts miss, so I have to call. So, I mean, I guess I'm calling here, even if we assume that hearts are like guaranteed outs for me. I'm really drawing to 3 jacks and 9 outs, and 9 hearts is 12 cards. So I guess I would need to be getting about 3-1, which I am doing better than that. I'm getting 4-1. So if we assume that that it's always going to be profitable for me to bluff hearts, I guess it is actually profitable for me to peel this bet. And then maybe I have a little bit of implied odds on hitting a jack when hearts miss. Yeah, I guess this is defensible, actually. And then I'm certainly going to bluff now that hearts have gotten there. And this is true even though he bets. And so I guess like you might be saying to yourself, well, what if he has a flush? Then he's about to win a big pot. It's nice if I have the king or 10 of hearts because it blocks that. And so, maybe that goes back to as early as pre-flop. I should have been, I should only float if I have a heart in my hand. It's possible that that's true. But I think having gotten this far, I don't really see an option other than shoving. I think he's going to have a pretty significant bet folding range here. I don't know if you guys can hear the soulful saxophone in the background, but as much as possible, I try to control the background noise when I'm making these videos, but I don't have a lot of control over the neighbors, so hopefully you're enjoying that and not finding it irritating. Let's see, I min-raise 3-bet from the small blind. I'm getting, on the one hand, this should be pretty strong. He's 3-betting knowing he's going to be out of position. On the other hand, I'm in position with a very playable hand. I'm getting better than 2-1. I'm going to take a flop for sure. Very nice flop for me. You might say, well, what's so good about it? All you flopped was a gut shot. I disagree with you so strongly. I have a backdoor flush draw. I have 2 potentially live cards. He has a lot of ace king and ace queen in his range, so the 10-8 is still pretty live. Like he has a lot of hands that not only am I live against 10-8, like I'm not looking at this as a pair draw versus ace king. I'm looking at this as he has a lot of unpaired hands in his range that I could make him fold. And 10-8 is a pretty good bluffing hand. This is also a board that's a lot better for my range than for his. A lot of people, I like 3-betting suited connectors from his spot precisely because you have good implied odds on boards like this one, but a lot of people don't do it. So there's a fair chance that he's also very capped on a board like this one. So I'm very excited to see this. Like what I'm seeing first is this is a good board to attack him on, and then I'm like, ooh, and on top of that I've got a really juicy hand for attacking him, so this is a great spot. I feel kind of like I flopped a set here. This is the same way that I know a lot of people like flop a set and they're like, oh sweet, we're about to win a big pot. I would maybe just shift that slightly from saying I'm about to win a big pot to I know I'm in a really plus EV spot now, and I would say exactly the same thing looking at this. Like just like when you flop a set, you're thinking, oh, my expected value just went through the roof. The same thing is true here. It's just a great flop and great hand for attacking. Just peeling on the flop. There's not really a lot of reason why I would raise many of my strong hands on the flop, and particularly when I have a backdoor flush draw. Like if I had 10-8 of diamonds, I might be a little more inclined to raise the flop, but because there are some turn cards that are really good for me, or a fair number of them actually, I'm perfectly happy just calling here. He, I think, makes a mistake betting the 7. The reason I say it's a mistake is that he has very, very few strong hands here. And I think he should probably be going into more of a bluff catching sort of mode now and just checking a ton of his range. But I think sometimes people bet here with something like pocket jacks because they're afraid that if they check, I might bluff. And I suppose that betting does actually stop some people from bluffing, but it does not stop me. I think raising here would be okay, but I also think that calling in no way caps my range. It might even be more plausible, actually, that I would just call here with a lot of my very strong hands. So again, he finds himself in the spot of, okay, he didn't stop me from bluffing, and maybe he was thinking to himself, I'll bet for information on the turn. I'll find out where I stand. Well, he didn't find anything out because even though I had nothing, I called him again, and it's still going to be very hard for him to play the river. So I just want to emphasize, and I don't know if he has jacks here or what. We're not going to see his hand, but I know that a lot of you maybe handle a spot like this. And this is a rough spot. I mean, it's a really nasty spot to be in with pocket jacks, which is exactly why I'm playing my hand this way, to put him in that kind of nasty spot. But I know that some people have the idea of, well, the way to navigate this is to just bet again. And as long as I bet again, I'll be safe. I'll find out where I stand and he won't bluff me. And those things just aren't true, or at least they're not true against everybody. And I think a lot of people overestimate how true they are against any given opponent. And now finally he's got a check and he gets a stack in the face. And again, like if he's holding pocket jacks, what's he going to do here? Like hope I have 9-8 or 10-8 or something. I mean, maybe he does and that's fine. But sometimes I will have, lots of times, I'll have trips or a full house or a straight or something. It's just it's a gross spot for him to be in. Which is the idea. King 10 off again. Why do I keep bluffing with hands so much? It's definitely peeling out of the big blind. That's good. Check, he bets. See, I just went for a check raise right here. This doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's very few hands I would check raise for value here. I don't even think like sixes or deuces are good hands to check raise. I can't really have, it's not impossible that I have jacks, but it's not very likely. Like, I don't think I should really have a check raising range here. I think this is probably a hand I played a couple of years ago. I would like to think I wouldn't play a hand this way now. And also I don't recognize any of my opponent's names. Which makes me think that it was a few years ago because I still sort of recognize some of the Zoom regulars from a year or two ago. I do have the backdoor straight draw. I mean, it's similar to some of the other hands like that I've talked about where I do think I have a lot of equity here. I think calling with this hand actually would be okay. I just don't think raising it is ideal. If he's continuation betting too much, getting him off of hands like ace queen is nice. I guess I am showing him on a 100% C bet. It's only 4 out of 4, but that's makes me feel a little bit better about this. That maybe just for exploitive reasons, I can get away with check raising rather than just check calling. But very nice card for me now because I pick up a gut shot, and I do have a diamond blocker as well. So some hands, one feature of a hand that would make it good for check raise bluffing the flop would be having a backdoor flush draw. So I want to be anticipating what's going to happen if the river is a diamond. I know that I'm going to have a pretty good bluffing spot there because I'll have a fair number of flushes in my range, and so I want to have some good bluffing hands when the river's a diamond, and the king of diamonds is a very nice card for that. There also might be some hands like he might have peeled the flop with hands like king, queen of diamonds, and then obviously he's not going to fold that on this turn card. So when I have king of diamonds, it blocks a hand that's in his calling or raising range on the turn, which is going to make it better for bluffing. So I definitely think having gotten this far, firing the turn is a no-brainer. And then when the river completes the flush, I think, again, I've got a pretty no-brainer decision. He has some strong hands in his range. Occasionally he'll have binked off a flush here, but I do think my king is a pretty significant blocker. I block him binking off a straight as well. The 10 is a nice straight blocker. He could have slow played a set twice, but I think a lot of people raise their sets on the turn. And I actually would feel confident enough in a set being the best hand here that I actually think I could shove a set for value on the river even. So I think I can just shove maybe like sixes plus and some good bluffing candidates. And again, I don't know that check raising the flop is the best way to go, but once you get this far, I think king 10 belongs pretty squarely in the bluffing range. I go back and forth a little bit on this, but for the most part, I really don't like calling raises from good players, especially late position raises from good players out of the small blind. I like to play like against the button raise where the button is a player who I respect. I want to play a 3-better fold game, and this I think is a pretty just straightforward spot where like ace 10 offsuit is well enough ahead of his button opening range that I want to play it, and if I just flat, then I give Greg a lot of room to squeeze or make profitable calls, which I don't really want to do, and I can put a lot of pressure on Daddy. I mean, Daddy basically has to either fold very, very often, which is perfectly fine, I'll take what's out there right now, or he has to call me with hands that are worse than ace 10. I know some people are reluctant to do this because they say that, well, what if he has ace king? Maybe he does. I mean, you block ace king, that's pretty nice. But yeah, sometimes he'll have a hand better than this. Sometimes he'll 4-bet it and you'll fold. Other times he'll call, and it won't happen that often that you'll flop an ace, right? And there's only so many aces in the deck. So if there's one in his hand and there's one in your hand, you're not gonna hit the ace that often, but yeah, sometimes you'll hit that parlay and you'll lose a lot of money. But he has a lot of hands. He's opening from the button. He doesn't always have ace king. I see so much worst case scenario thinking where people kind of go around like, what if my opponent has a monster? I better not bluff. What if my opponent has a monster? I better not value bet. It's very hard to make strong hands in poker, and ironically, that's the other thing a lot of people complain about is like, oh, I'm always card dead. I haven't gotten any cards in so long. I'm not catching cards. Da, 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 da. Your opponents are the same way. They don't catch cards that often either. Like nobody catches cards that much. It's hard to catch cards. If the only time that you lose big pots to your opponents is when they catch cards, that's fine. Like that's what I aim for. Paying off monsters is no problem for me. I don't mind paying off monsters when I have strong hands. I don't mind bluffing into monsters. Perfectly fine. I want to make it difficult for my opponent to play against me anytime that they don't have a monster. Bluffing is a really important component of that, as is thin value betting. Like they go together to make it difficult for your opponent to play any kind of non-monster hand. Obviously, a button opener has a lot of non-monster hands in his range. I'm trying to make it hard for him to play all of those by choosing a good free betting strategy from the small blind. I actually think that there's a good enough chance I have the best hand right now that I don't even really need to be thinking in terms of turning it into a bluff. I think this would be a pretty reasonable spot to check the flop. On the other hand, having the ace of diamonds means that I'm going to have a very profitable bet when the turn is a diamond. And I do have a gut shot straight as well. So I don't mind betting here. One of the big disadvantages of checking is that I end up giving free cards to hands like 7-6 of hearts, which, I mean, there's not that much value in folding out 7-6 of hearts, but there is some. And I'm not going to get bluffed out on the flop, but I might get bluffed out by multiple barrels. And what I mean by not going to get bluffed out on the flop is if I check the flop, it's with the intention of calling a bet. So yeah, I mean, just being out of position with no pair, nothing can go that wrong when you bet. I wouldn't hate checking here, but I chose to bet. Now he does a very sort of shady thing. He raises the flop, and I mean, this can be a little dangerous because we're getting into a leveling war now. I don't know that this is we're moving away from GTO type thinking and more towards I just think he's full of it. I just don't think he has much. One of the hands that he would be raising for a sort of value here actually would be ace-x of diamonds, which I block. So I think he just is pretty full of it here with this flop raise, and I don't mind peeling him. In fact, right now I'm still thinking there's a pretty decent chance I have the best hand. So I'm calling, and we end up going check check. The river being the 8 of diamonds, I think I decided that I would rather turn, even though I called the flop thinking there was a decent chance I had the best hand, I think with the river being a diamond, bluffing now is going to be quite profitable for me, holding the nut flush draw. Checking is still going to be profitable. There is some chance that I have the best hand. Checking calling, it might even be profitable. So it's not even that I can't realize my equity by checking. It's just a question of whether bluffing will be even more profitable than trying to show this hand down. And I think this is a great hand to end with because I think this is a question a lot of people don't ask themselves. And one of the main points, other than entertainment value, one of the main things I hope you'll take away from this video is the idea that you've got to ask yourself about bluffing, because if you don't ask, you often will miss some of the better bluffing spots. If you never think to yourself, what should my bluffing range be here? Not all bluffs are obvious. Some of them are. We talked about the ace-9 of hearts on the king, queen, 10, 2 hearts board. Like that, I think, is a pretty obvious bluffing spot. But not all bluffs are obvious. And if you just think to yourself, if you just have a rule of I never bluff a showdown value, you're going to miss that check raise with the 10-8 or whatever it was. You're gonna miss this bluff here, where I think even though you do have some showdown value, bluffing could end up being even more profitable. And that's what I decided to do. I think he may have raised the flop. I'm not going to get him off of a king. I don't have any delusions of that. But I think it's possible he raised the flop with a hand like pocket sevens. Again, with that sort of wrong-headed thinking of like, I'm going to see where I'm at. I'm going to protect my hand a little bit. I think it's not impossible that he was making a kind of merged value protection-y sort of raise on the flop. And I want to get him off of those kind of hands. And I think if he has something like pocket nines here, it's a pretty trivial fold at this point, and I want to take advantage of those folds. And I think blocking the diamonds in his range is a very big deal, and is the reason why I decided to turn this hand into a bluff. All right, hope you found that entertaining, and thanks again to everybody who donated. If you did enjoy this, then please swing by baudl.org, click on the donate button, and contribute whatever you thought the video was worth. I'd be very appreciative. Thanks for watching.